I would say traditionally it's always been April, and then some places I've been to where the elevation is a little higher, say anywhere in the high desert states, which is generally almost all out west. You can't plant until June because there's always that risk of a late frost. If the plants are little, I'd say if they're under a foot and the temperature goes below freezing for maybe more than a day, they can all die right there at that moment.
Hey guys, it's Mandi with Global Hemp Association. I wanted to say thank you so much for joining. I'm excited about the opportunity to build a relationship and connect this supply chain. I mean, after all, that's why we started the association. Our association was built on the foundation of connecting supply chain, building relationships, and helping you grow your business. Anyone from farmers, manufacturers, and distributors, people that are passionate about the supply chain, and those creating products selling into biofuels, plastics, textiles, construction, and building materials.
Hello, everybody. I'm really excited about this conversation today. I hope all of you log on, and when you do, please say hello. Please let Larry and I both know that you're here, where you're chiming in from when you log in. But Larry, please, Larry and Lawrence, what do you go by typically?
Professionally, you use Lawrence. That's fine. Usually I use Larry, family, and friends.
Okay, yeah. I got you. Well, I'm really excited to have you here today and excited to share your story. And you kind of gave me a little hint about how things have gone for you over the last 30 years in this industry and dealing with hemp. And so excited about the opportunity you're sharing, really what you've learned. But before we do, tell me a little bit about who you are, where you came from, and how you've gotten to where you're at now and where this passion.
All right. Well, thank you, Mandi. Thank you for having me on the show. And I have been in the hemp industry for 31 years. I got started in 1990. Yes, you can use the term visionary because there was certainly no vision in front of me for hemp at that time. I made the decision to do hemp. I was graduating college and I wanted to do a business. I wanted it to be something that would be environmental. I kind of felt I had, something to give during my life on Earth. And so I felt it would be a way to make money and do something positive for the planet. So in college, I had been a biology major, and we actually had studied cannabis a little bit. And around that time, they had actually discovered the receptors for cannabis in the brain. So as a final report on cannabis, a final report that I had to do in college, it had to be an oral report in front of my whole class on anything we wanted. And I chose that medical cannabis thing because I thought it would be interesting, to my fellow college classmates. Mm-hmm. So at the library, there was no internet at that time. And as I was looking up cannabis, medical or whatever, the term hemp came up. And I saw a few little things that said, it had been used for rope, it had been used for clothing, it had been used for, paper. And I thought, at that time, I was like, that's kind of interesting. Yeah. But didn't, really think too much about it. Then I also read a little bit of the book, The Emperor Wears No Clothes. Yeah. And, I thought, wow, that's kind of interesting. So here I am, I graduate college and, decided I wasn't going to go into medicine. Thought I might do that, but changed my mind, wanted to do the business. And I'm like, what can I do? And I remember I woke up one morning and it just hit me like a ton of bricks. I'm like, that's it. I'll do a hemp business. No one's doing it because it's illegal. If you can make paper, we're going to save the trees. We can maybe make particle board, all the things that we talk about today. Jack had mentioned that in his book. And I thought that was a great idea. And I was going to become rich right away because I was the first one that realized it and could, turn it around and make it happen, as a business. So
immediately, I want to welcome Larry Lawrence, who's wealthy from his opportunity in this industry. Is that right? Is that how that went for you?
Say that again?
You just became very wealthy very fast?
No.
It's this misperception.
Not at all. I think we all think we're going to be that way when we enter business. we're going to, become a millionaire or a billionaire within a few years. And so, no, what happened first, I began to look for hemp. In my, at that time, I was looking through like the yellow pages. I had to go to the library in a business, list of businesses, and I could not find hemp anywhere. Nothing. Could I find? I even called government officials to confirm that. Hey, I called one. I'm like, hey, is it possible? Can you really make paper? And it was a government expert on paper. He said, yes, you can. A guy in textiles said, yes, you can make textiles. So I knew it was true. Couldn't find anyone. So I remember I was like, what am I going to do? So I grabbed The Emperor Wears No Clothes again, and I opened it up, and I went to the back page. There's a tiny little article, right there, that says Business Alliance for Commerce and Hemp is written there. And I'm like, bang, light bulb goes off. I'm like, that's it. Business. These are business people. I was never really a hippie, or anything in college, or I was never counterculture or anything. So, but I'm like, here it is. These are the business people. This is the people that I want to talk to. So, I had done internships in college and, had, been on interviews, right after college. So I was prepared. So, I called up the number and I talked with Chris Conrad, who was running the Business Alliance for Commerce and Hemp or BOC. And we talked for a little bit, and he says, oh, by the way, we're having a meeting, this Friday night or like in a week or something. Yeah. You're welcome to come. Now, a couple of things. One, he was located literally in Los Angeles. So I was like thinking, wow, out of the entire United States, here this guy is right here in LA where I am. What luck, could that be? So I was so excited, and I get on a suit and tie, and I have my briefcase, and I go to the address. It's dark out. It was something fall night, and, go up the stairs. It was an apartment, knock on the door. The door opens up, and I kid you not, a cloud of marijuana smoke billows out of the room. Okay. And then it was like you walk, and those scenes in the movie where you walk in the record scratches, and there's like a pause and everyone turns around. It's filled with these, counterculture hippie, like 1960s hippies people, but it's now, the 90s. Early 90s. And they're all there. They turn around and look at me, and I'm like, oh my God, what's happening? They're kind of thinking, is this the cop, who showed up, what's going on? So, right. As usual, counterculture people are very nice and accommodating, and, they let me in, and I sat down and we began to talk, and a little while later, also there's a knock on the door. Guess who shows up? But it's actually Jack Herrera even shows up to that meeting as well. He was in, and I had no idea he lived in the LA area, either at that time. He's there. And he's one of the people, and of course, they begin to pass around the joint. And, we have, and by the end of the meeting, I am like on cloud nine. I was just like really excited. Hey, we're going to do hemp. Of course, they were all enthusiastic about hemp and every aspect, smoking, medical, or industrial. Yeah. So I went up to Chris Conrad and I said, hey, this is really inspiring. I'd like to help out. I will volunteer to work for the Business Alliance for Commerce and Hemp. And he said, okay. So I began to come a couple of times a week after my other job. And I volunteered. I helped out. I learned what he was doing. And then Chris Conrad moved to Europe to write his own book on hemp. And he left me in charge, and I became the national director for the Business Alliance. I ended up moving into his apartment, and I ran it out of his apartment like he was. And during that time, there was like a state chapter for BOC. So every state had a chapter, and I began to meet people who were interested in hemp. And I had also there was a trade show in LA, a Chinese trade show, and I went to that, and I found some people that were importing textiles or had textiles to import. I asked them about hemp, and eventually they came back and they said they were able to find hemp out of China. So I ended up, I took some money that was my inheritance, from my grandfather. It was like $8,000, and I bought some fabric from China, and I brought it in. It came in at the very end of 1993, and so I tend to say my business began January 1994, selling the hemp fabric. And yeah, as you said, no, I remember I had a graph where I was going to double my sales every 3 months. When I started, every time that I was, bringing it in, it was going to sell out right away. I bring more in, it would all sell out, and it was doubling each time. And, I was going to be a millionaire really quick. The reality is it took me 20 years to get to where I thought it would have taken me about 5.
Yeah.
It took me about 4 times as long. But, during that time I grew, I learned business. I had no idea how to do business during that time. We expanded to, we have now, I think, almost over 100 different hemp fabrics. We have yarn, twine, rope, webbing. And I started another company. I've done a lot of different things. Yeah. I started another company called CannaGrove, making hemp particle board. I was on the board of the Hemp Industries Association. I held every position. So I was secretary, treasurer, and president for 2 years of the Hemp Industries Association. And I was also the chair of the California Industrial Hemp Advisory Board. So, I have a long history in hemp, fully immersed. But where I'm different from a lot of people is that I've always stayed focused on the fiber. Because I felt that that had the most potential.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So that's all about me, Mandi.
A long road to hoe, right? You have
yes.
time in. So talk to me a little bit about the present state of the hemp industry in general. Understand where you've been and where we're at.
All right. Well, I think you mean the hemp industry in general or the hemp fiber industry?
Fiber.
Okay. Yeah. So the hemp fiber industry, in reality, it's just in its infancy right now. If you were to take all the industrial hemp that was grown in this country in, say, like 2019, 2020, and even now 2021, my feeling is probably less than 5% was grown for fiber, if that. At that point, most of the people, you probably know, there was the whole CBD rush that got out there. Mm-hmm. So the reason we had the CBD rush is because when it began, we were under what I call prohibition prices. Yeah. There was way, way, way more demand than there was supply. And people were able to get thousands of dollars, hundreds or thousands of dollars per pound for their high CBD flower. The only problem with this, or I should say that enticed a lot of people, to get into it. The only problem with this is that flower is actually a low-hanging fruit, pun intended, with that. And what I mean is that if you have a backyard and you have a kitchen, you can grow a hemp plant, a high CBD hemp plant. You can extract the oil, put it in a jar, and your CBD oil is going to be no different than any other CBD oil that's out there.
Well, and you can produce a lot of product from few plants.
Yes, exactly. And I was about to get to that. We figured that if you go by how much you can get, like milligrams of CBD per acre, and then you divide, figure out how many people there are in the U.S., we figured that there could be enough CBD for every person in America on about 75,000 acres, grown. And I'm sure people can argue with me, and even if I'm wrong and it's double, still 150,000 acres is not a huge crop,
right?
To do it with it. So what's happening is the fiber, the other industry that has actually happened, but it happened in Canada, and that is the grain industry, and that is growing it for seed. And they legalized hemp in Canada in the late 90s, so that industry took off there. You had companies like Manitoba Harvest and Hemp Oil Canada were able to take advantage of growing and processing for hemp seed oil, hemp seed hearts, hemp seed protein powder, and hemp seed shells or anything else that you get out of it. And that actually worked. But the only drawback to that is that market has become saturated because it's only allowed for humans to eat. You can only feed it. And when I say saturated, I mean, if you go to Vaughn's, Ralph's, some of the major supermarkets that are out there, you will find hemp seed oil. You will find hemp protein powder. It's already out there.
It's at Walmart. Walmart
Yes,
is a big
exactly.
section now because, I mean, and again, I think that speaks to what consumers are asking for.
Right.
Plant-based product, and hemp fits right in there for not just plant, food.
Right. But I haven't seen a lot of innovation beyond that in terms of human food. Maybe, I don't know, maybe they can make it as an ingredient for a veggie burger or something, but I haven't seen much more. Now, the big thing on the grain is when we'll be able to use it for animal feed. And I'm sure you've had people on here who talk quite a bit more about it than I would, but that will be a big opportunity for areas of the country that grow a lot of grain. And it could be either for, cattle, for pets, for chickens, livestock, animals that we eat or animals that we have for pets. So that would be a big deal. And that's actually, once again, not as hard to get into because there's already equipment available to grow, harvest, and process all of this. It happened in Canada first. It's a little harder. It's a little harder to take off in America because, as I said, the markets are already saturated. So there's not a lot of new area to go into. You would have to be an American producer who is making the same product, and then you have to go kind of fight for shelf space, as they like to say. But once we get it into the animal, then it could be a lot bigger. So now we say we get to the fiber. Fiber is the most difficult one to get into because in order for this to work, you need to, one, grow a lot of it. You need to have maximum amount of acreage. I would say for a farmer, 100 to 500 acres minimum, that you should be growing to make it work. Whereas,
to make it work, but if they're growing or contracting into, say, an operation like yours or somebody who's processing, you see that something that's viable?
Yes, I'm going to get into that in a moment.
We're talking big agriculture. This is not a horticulture crop like the high resin CBD crops, right? This is
right. And I will get into that in a moment. It's one of our next questions. So, you need, you don't want to be growing, like for CBD, you can't grow it in the backyard. You can't grow the 1 or 2 or 3 acre plots, and think that this is going to be able to make you the money for the time you're going to put into it. It just won't work. You need a lot, has to be what I call farm scale, real farm scale, with real farm equipment, every way for it to work. So because one reason it's hard to get into, you need to grow a lot of it. Number 2, and this is most important, you need processing facilities for it. You need a way to separate the bast fiber from the core fiber when you're working with it. And if you do not have that, it is not economical to try to ship the raw hemp stalks, or what I might call hemp straw, around the country in order for this to work. You've got to have this, and I say this quite readily, about 50 miles, for this to work. Other than that, you're going to be adding, I'd say for every 50 miles beyond that, you're going to be adding like $50 a ton onto it. I don't know. I'd have to work that out with freight rates, but it is, you should have it close. It's got to be grown like other traditional crops that way.
Well,
go ahead.
Keeping in mind, I can hear myself echo, so I apologize. Can you hear my sound being weird?
A little bit. Now you sound better.
The circularity and sustainability that keeps coming up within the industry, and trucking the product across the country just negates this, value to the carbon footprint, or a lot of that value. And so not just cost, I think there's a lot involved in it.
Well, yeah, and you can actually, what I think people don't realize is you can equate cost to environmental footprint.
Oh yeah.
Generally, the higher the cost, the more the environmental footprint. The lower the cost, usually the lower the environmental footprint, because there's a cost, to move something, take, gas, energy, time, effort to do things like that. If you can do everything nearby, that's actually beneficial to the environment. You don't have to move it around. And I'm going to get more into that in a moment because you're going to question me on that in a little bit.
Okay.
I think I'm contradicting myself.
I keep talking because I just want to go. And yes.
All right.
No, you go
All
ahead.
right, so you got to have. So we're saying, why hasn't the fiber industry really taken off? And then another aspect is, the technology. You need the equipment. You need to grow a lot. And then the other is the market. Where are you going to sell and offload all of this? Nobody's been working with hemp for years. People talk about the building industry. People talk about textiles. They talk about insulation and things like that, but if you look at that end of it, let's say I approach a company, and I talk to these people all the time, a company that makes ceiling tiles, all right? They're currently using fiberglass and paper waste. They're thinking they want to use hemp for it. And I'm like, great, that would work fine. And it looks like money-wise it will work, and it will even be a better product. But in order for it to work, they need like 100 tons a month of material.
Yeah.
So they don't want to get into it until, we like to say it's the chicken and the egg. People don't want to buy it until it's there, and people don't want to make it until there's someone ready to buy it. So we've had a bit of that problem because it has to be done on a large scale. But, little by little, we are, solving these problems. So I think I'll lead into the next question you're going to ask me.
California. Tell me what's happening in California with Riverdale Hemp Company.
All right. So I've been in hemp so long, I just say, the old adage, if you want something done right, you got to do it yourself. So prior to 2021, I was selling fiber seeds. Well, I brought them in for some other companies. I was able to sell it, and it was a product for us. But in 2017, we actually legalized hemp in California to grow, but we really didn't get any, the registration wasn't in place until 2019. And so in 2019, and even a little bit in 2020, I gave a little bit of seed to farmers, just volunteered, said, here's 50 pounds. Could you plant an acre for me and let me know how it goes? Let me know what happens, with it. Are you able to grow it with fiber? And I must have given that to maybe about 6 to 10 people overall. And that happened both years in 2009 and 2020. And not one of them ever followed through, on it. Either they never planted or they planted and then didn't do anything with it, never harvested it, it just went to seed, weren't able to measure it. So finally, in 2020, at the end of 2020, I was just like, I got to do this myself. It's got to work. I got to get this done. Yeah. So I contacted with Tom Piers.
Yeah.
And I met Tom. He was on the California Industrial Hemp Advisory Board with me. We met that way. And he was a cotton farmer and also the manager of a cotton gin, farmers co-op cotton gin in the Central Valley of California. So we met there. I called him and he agreed that we could do a test planting on his land. So I was able to get the seeds. I paid him money and we grew it there. And for somebody who's never grown hemp before and never been a farmer before, we did wonderfully there. Better. Here's the thing. When I started getting into this for the fiber, there's no technical data out there. I had to go by government reports that I think the most recent one had to have been written in the 60s or something. And a lot of them went back to even the 10s and 20s. And these reports are things like, how do you grow hemp? How do you harvest it? What are your plant densities? What are your yields? How much water? How much fertilizer? Things like that. But a lot of it goes back to a time when farming was a lot different. It was, I would say, not without modern technology to aid it.
Scalable.
Scalable, things were done on a smaller scale, and a lot of things were still done by hand, with it when they do it. Also, grown in different areas of the country. Get rid of that. Different areas of the country that might not apply to where we're growing here in California. So when I planted the hemp, I was just hoping that, my first year that I'd be able to match, what these yields were and what they had gotten for people who have been growing it for maybe dozens or tens, 20, 30, 40 years, things that they had gotten with it. And we ended up, so far we measured 2 of our plots, and we're about 25% greater than what the historic yield was number one. And and by the way, that changes a lot. It makes things, I've done all my math, on what a farmer can get, the yield, cost of fiber, based on yields, historic yields. Getting 25% more yield lowers all those costs, makes it a lot more feasible. So that was really big. And then you probably saw where it would grow the world's tallest hemp plant that we put out. And we have it documented. We submitted it to the Guinness Book of World Records, and we're just going to have to wait for them to verify it.
That's pretty cool.
And, it will be there. And, with that, I look at that as a challenge. In all honesty, there was no tallest hemp plant. When I called or went on the website for Guinness Book of World Records and said, what is the record for the tallest hemp plant? There wasn't any. No one had ever done it before. So by default, ours is going to be the tallest. And I say that openly. I'm not trying to hide anything. The purpose of this was to try to spur competition. Let's get some other people, wanting to grow fiber hemp and beat my record, 24 feet 1 inch. When we do it. And that's the whole thing. But you can see once again, if you can grow it, we'll do really well. Now, California is unique in that respect, in that we were able to get the hemp in the ground on March 5th. And March 5th, in many other parts of the country, there's still snow on the ground. You can't plant. I would say traditionally it's always been April. And then some places I've been to where the elevation is a little higher, say anywhere in the high desert states, which is generally almost all out west, you can't plant till June because there's always that risk of a late frost. If the plants are little, I'd say if they're under a foot and the temperature goes below freezing for maybe more than a day, they can all die right there at that moment. You also have that problem on the other end in fall, and probably not for a fiber crop, but possibly for a grain crop. If you let it go too long, there could be a frost that could kill them.
What about the retting process with the frost?
All right, so that's another issue. And that is, there's different methods of retting. So one way would be water retting, or I should back up and undefine what retting is for everyone. And that is, retting is synonymous with the word rotting. And what it means is the stalk, once cut, begins to decompose. And it can decompose through water in the air. I should say, it requires water to decompose. That water can come from moisture in the air, as in humidity, or it can come from, you can put the hemp underwater, and it can break down that way as well. So if you put it underwater, it's referred to as water retting. If you let the moisture come from the dew, it's referred to as dew retting. Now, we had a unique experience in California, and that is we're very, very dry. So we cut it down, and the stalks within a week ended up completely drying. When they dry, they lose 70% of their moisture. 70% of the weight is water in it. And we ended up taking it, baling it, and we brought it in that state right to the factory. And for some reason, when we put it in our machinery, it was able to decorticate without really doing any kind of official retting on it. And I'm actually not exactly sure why that happened, because it wasn't what I was expecting. what I thought was it was going to break the stalk up, and we would end up with lots of fiber with bits of stalk glued onto it, if you've ever seen that. But it completely fell off, and while on the first pass it wasn't totally clean, it was just kind of free floating in there, and then we were able to brush it and remove all the herd, and we ended up with absolute clean fiber for it. So, right here to show you.
Josh just had a great question. And hello, Josh, if you're still on. And he said, saw the hemp. It's amazing. Will it be easier to harvest 2 crops instead of 1?
Well, it depends kind of where you are and what you're trying to do. So we grew for fiber, and we wanted to get a very high yield. So planting early, we ended up harvesting in August and September, and even then, we were able to harvest a little later than I thought. And now, before I go off on a tangent, let me answer his question about it. So he says, can we get 2 crops? So we put it in March, we harvested in August, September. So the question, could we put another crop in the ground afterwards? So I doubt we could put a fiber crop in afterwards because of the light cycle. If we put the same seeds in, they grow about a foot and then they flower. So it would not be, we could maybe do that if we were trying to get grain or try to repropagate for the next year. But even then, since they would only grow about a foot before they'd flower, that wouldn't work. So then it would beg the question, could we do another type of variety of hemp? Could we do a regular grain variety? And actually, it might work. It's possible maybe to plant in March, harvest maybe late July, putting a grain crop in early August, and then you might be able to get decent grain sometime in October, November. That might work. And then, you've probably heard about autoflower varieties of hemp. Somebody then, in the winter, plant an autoflower CBD variety. Would that work? Or, is that possible? Maybe. I don't know if anyone's ever tried doing something like that.
I don't know if you see Josh's comment, and good question. Was wondering, instead, because of its size, was it hard to harvest and handle because it was so tall? And would it
a little bit? Yeah, we were doing
harvest earlier, plant again, and then harvest.
Well, there's a balance there. Generally, when you talk about the farmer, they want to know what they're going to earn per acre. What is their profit per acre? Right. Now, because of the yield that we got, we are now anticipating that a farmer growing for fiber in our area will earn about $1,600 to $1,700 profit per acre on it. We even know all the costs involved with it. Now, what's the original question on that?
Just wondering about harvest. I think.
Oh yeah, it wasn't harder. Now, the fact that they were taller, we were using a sickle bar, and
so you just
we were kind of thinking that we might cut the tops off and use that as silage or use that as animal feed. And since we're so tall, that would require a machine that could do a very tall multiple sickle bar cut on it. We just used it a single cut, and we did it from the bottom. The one problem was, the second crop that we grew, we also had another planting that we did April 2nd as well, and that one was a lot denser. So when we got into it, it was a lot of plants. It was very dense, and even the sickle bar was having a hard time with it, so the tractor had to run at about half speed in order to do it. But that's okay, because we looked at it, we realized that the problem, we know what we have to do for next year to solve it. And that's the whole reason why I did a practice crop this year rather than contract with farmers to grow this first year.
Good job.
I had to do it myself to see everything involved with it.
Great job. Okay, so what advice would you have? What advice would you give farmers getting into this industry?
Well, there's 2 things. I'll start with if you're getting into the fiber industry.
Yeah.
All right.
Sorry, I'm fiber focused also. I look at hemp the hemp industry as a fiber industry. And sometimes I'm like, oh yeah, wait, there's this big other piece.
Right. Yeah. As I actually have, two answers to that question, one for fiber and one for in general. I'll start with fiber. Okay. So, when you say the hemp fiber industry, that's going to end up being extremely broad and is going to probably encompass multiple industries directly and indirectly with it. For example, let's say you're building hempcrete homes. You might say, I'm in the hemp fiber industry because you're using hemp fiber. The reality, though, is you're more in the building industry. When you do it, is your raw material happens to be the hemp with it. When you talk about the hemp fiber industry, we're all really going to talk about it was going to be the farmers, it's going to be the growers, and it's going to be the people who are going to process it, and then possibly the people that are going to be the first buyers of that raw material would probably be the ones we can define. So my advice, if you want to be a farmer in the hemp fiber industry, one, make sure that your area can grow hemp. You probably heard this, Mandi. There's a rumor that you can grow hemp anywhere, and that's not true. Generally, if your area has never grown hemp, it's maybe not a good idea, to try growing it there. If you don't have farmland,
It's one thing to say you can grow it. It's another thing to say that it will grow successfully with little, additives or additional water or, it's
successfully or
apples
profitably.
to oranges.
Yeah, and in that regard, if you want an easy answer, if you can grow corn, you can probably grow hemp. Yeah, it's just very simple. So I want to know if your area is only growing alfalfa, because you're so high up, high altitude, then you may not be the right area to grow hemp. To give you an example. So corn is good. You need to be one to grow it. Two, you want to make sure, this is really important, that there's a processor or somebody who's going to be able to buy it from you at that point. You have to have that. Three, when you do grow it, you really have to make sure you're getting the right strain. For things like strain for fiber is one, but then the other aspect is the latitude that you're at. We grew at 39 degrees latitude. So it ended up doing very, very well, but higher or lower, it may not grow that well. And we even had people who grew right next to us, other varieties, and their varieties ended up flowering right away, after a foot or so, because they were supposed to be grown in a much higher latitude. They were European grain varieties. So you don't want that happening to you. If you're going to grow, it's got to be the right one. You got to have somebody to buy it. Then, as far as growing and harvesting, it's not that much different than a lot of other crops. California is unique in that we do not rely on the rain. We get all our water from either wells or aqueducts that flow here from the mountains. So our water, the plus and minus to that is our water is measured and accurate. So the plants always get the right amount, and we know exactly how much they're getting, including ways to decrease that amount. The drawback to that is we have to pay for water. So it adds to the cost of growing the crop. On the other hand, there's other areas of the country where all the water comes from the rain. And positive to that, you don't have to pay for your water. Drawback, too much or too little rain, and that can,
I saw a field even just recently where you could see where the low parts of the field didn't have any hemp because it had gotten too much rain, and where the higher parts of the field harvest was fabulous.
Perfect. Yeah, that's because you cannot, when you're growing hemp, cannot have a puddle. Or in farm language, they say you cannot allow wet feet, at it. You cannot allow the puddles. That's why usually they say sandy soil is better because it allows for drainage. If the water's there, it kills the roots. That's why they die. Right away. So little farm tip that people learned from growing it. And as you say, you saw the results, right there.
Yeah.
So, you gotta, if you're a farmer, right seed, rain, gotta grow it right, gotta have processors, but then you have to grow it the right way. You have to grow it for fiber. All right. None of this, and I have to speak carefully here. Let's just say I hate to see it when people think they're going to get the same type of fiber if they have a buyer tricrop. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, and this is very, very important. The fiber that you're going to get if you grow for flower or for CBD is going to be one, a lot less valuable in terms of quality, and you're going to get about 1/6 to 1/8 the amount of volume of fiber if you let it go to grain or flour. So you have to realize that if you're growing for fiber, you've got to grow for fiber. If you're growing for grain, you have to grow for grain. If you're growing for flour, you have to grow for flour. Now, if you grow for fiber, you're going to get the herd as a byproduct. If you grow for flour or grain, you will get both herd and fiber as a byproduct. The value of the herd will be the same, although less volume. The value of the fiber will be less volume and less value. So, for example, if somebody were to build a facility in an area where they were growing for grain, they have to make sure that there's enough grain being grown. A lot of alliteration there when I say that, because if there's not enough grain, since grain is the main crop, if farmers aren't growing it, your whole plant or fiber decortication isn't going to work because you won't have enough feedstock for it. And now here's the thing. It could be a great business model. I'm not saying that's not going to work, but you would first have to focus on the grain, get that going, before you would then focus a bit on the fiber to do it. You want to make sure that all works.
Right. Well, talk about the chicken and egg and the scenario of what we're going to do and how we get it to market. So talk to me about advice for people getting into the industry, not necessarily for the fiber side.
Okay, well, wait. I have one more little bit of advice on the fiber people.
Okay,
I just talked about the farmers. The other end are the processors.
Yes.
Okay, people who want to get into it. Now, there is not a lot of processing being done right now. There's a lot of talk at the moment. There are people who have machines, but they're not actually, they're selling the machines. They're not actually the processors that are out there. So being able to provide the fiber in large amounts just isn't quite happening yet. And that's what we're working on. But if you want to go into processing, a couple of things. There's a few key components. Okay, one, whatever processor you get, whatever equipment you get, you need it to be 99.9% separated or better. Okay, you got to have that amount of separation. If you're not at that level, the value of what you have is going to be way lower. All right, and that value could make or break a company. They can't get it high enough. Number two, the other main thing is is the cleanliness of what you get. Is it going to be free from, when you get it, maybe you get all the herd, but there's also a bunch of dust or other things in it, fiber like that. And then the third one is the capacity that you need. How many tons can you do per hour or per day? Because, when you start doing the math, if you can't get the right enough, a high enough processing volume, it won't cover your expenses for the people running it, or your fiber might end up having to be more money than what the market will bear. So those are the three things that I'd say anyone getting into the processing of the fiber. And then your next, or follow up a question with me or ask me your next one.
Well, also, Bill just chimed in. I don't know if you can answer this one really quick. What about chemical or biological stem fractionalization?
All right. Well, what we can do is, once we chop it, we're always looking for the best way to do the decortication or to separate it. Now, right now the factory is there and it seems like it's working, so we go with that. But here's the thing: when you're talking about other chemical or biological things, once the fiber is decorticated, separated from the stalk, it still needs to be separated from each other. And this is where hemp differs from cotton. Cotton, each fiber is already separated. Hemp, they're kind of like that in it. So, you can do a process, either chemical or biological. I like to refer to these as wet processes that will then break down the lignins that are holding it, and the fibers begin to separate, and they become more useful for different applications. We'll probably get into that later. It's kind of like maybe a step 2 for us. It's now we got to be able to get the fiber in quantity, large enough quantities at a low enough price that it's going to work for everyone.
Right. Well, and it's always that secondary processing that's people are curious about. So, okay, so advice going into the industry in general then.
All right, yeah. So now here's the thing: we're getting a lot of excitement about hemp. People want to get into it, and sometimes people just, I love hemp. I want to get into it, but I don't know what to do. How do I get into it? What do I need to do? Okay, well, first I'd say, take a deep breath. Okay, think about it, and first of all, think what you enjoy doing. Okay, there are so many different talents that people have. Anything from, some people are accountants, some people are artists, some people are great with computers, some people are great at farming, some people love medicine and healing, some people like science. Okay, so the good news about hemp is, the industry is so big, is there's a place for everyone, to do something in it. Okay, number one, so there is something for everyone. All right, but then, when you're getting into it, you have to, realize what's reasonable and what's not reasonable. For example, if you are living in the middle of the desert and your dream is to grow hemp, on your, 500 acres in the middle of the desert, maybe that's not reality. And I don't say that jokingly. I get phone calls like that. You have to be reasonable with this. A lot of people will ask me, hey, I want to start making hemp textiles all the way in America, every part of it. We'll grow it here, process it here, make it here. Well, America's really not making textiles anymore. That industry is mostly left.
Right.
Okay, and you can demand as much as you want, that it comes back, but the textile industry is big. It requires lots and lots of equipment, machinery, millions and millions of dollars of infrastructure. And at the end of the day, I've had it where I've made something in America, handed it to somebody, then they're like, oh, it's too expensive. Then they don't want to buy it. So all of that has to be taken. And here's another thing, as I say, the more expensive something is, usually the more damaging to the environment it is. So to say, oh, well, made in America here, therefore we didn't ship it around. But if it's more money, there could be reasons. And I'll give you a good thing. When we process, I'll give you an example. When we are growing our hemp for fiber, a certain amount of it I'm going to ship to my partner in China. Because they have the ability there, the machinery, the equipment, the expertise to do that wet process, to spin it into yarn and turn it into fabric. It's the pathway of least resistance. Now, people might argue, oh, well, wait a minute, now you're shipping, you just said, it has to be close, right? And I told you could get me on that. But I have an answer for you, and that is ocean freight is the cheapest and most environmental way to ship anything anywhere. Okay. It, prior to recently, now with a lot higher rates as there's a lot of demand, it actually is cheaper for me to ship a container from LA to China than it is for me to put it on a truck and ship it from LA to San Francisco.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And think about that, because think how big a container ship is.
Yeah.
Think how many containers are on that. Maybe tens of thousands of containers. And once that ship gets going, it gets inertia in it. So they don't have to put a lot of energy into the engines, to keep it going. So versus one truck is one container, you're limited to the narrow, you're limited both length, width, and height on that. With the ship, you have no limitations. You get both length, width, and height and go pretty high. with it. So it's a lot cheaper that way. So by doing it this way, it's for us, it's a path of least resistance. It's more environmental, and it will result in a better quality, cheaper or less expensive hemp product, which will allow more demand, which will allow us to grow a lot more. Because that's the idea. We're still growing it in America. We're providing jobs for farmers with it.
Awesome. Well, the reality is back to the beginning of our conversation and talking about what's grown and understanding the type of fiber or the type of seed and the type of genetic to the end product that you're, producing, is that, the supply chains are not developed in the United States from seed to end product on any.
Not yet. We're really lacking on the spinning. We do have a little bit of knitting and weaving here in America. It may be working. Here's the thing. I don't discount it. When we were at the North Carolina show, I met a number of people who were in North Carolina, and they still have a spinning and weaving industry there. That's out of, when we think of the South. And so don't discount it. They may be able to develop something there, and it may work. And if it isn't hemp for fabric or what it called woven uses, it'd be hemp for non-woven uses. So that would be hemp for all the building materials, insulation, paper, plastics, all of that. And that part of the industry cannot happen by importing the raw material. That has to be homegrown.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was going. These different industries, right?
I plan to be providing, we're providing material for the industry. It's not even planned. I'm already doing it.
Okay, so I want to keep talking about this, but I have to go. We've got an event here in just a little bit for our monthly networking on our new Hemp Hallway platform. And so if anybody wants to join, it's also on LinkedIn for our event. But Larry, how do people get in touch with you? How do people?
All right. Well, we have my main web page, which is hemptraders.com. And you can reach me at contact@hemptraders.com. I answer all the emails, so I'll be happy to answer any questions. And then if you're interested in what's happening at Riverdale, in our new factory there, we have riverdalehempfactory.com. And you'll see what we're doing for the fiber, growing the hemp and processing it.
RiverdaleHempFactory.com.
Riverdale. Yeah, it's like the Archie comic books, Riverdale.
Okay, I just shared them so people can find them. Well, I'm really impressed, and I wish so bad I could have made it down. I'm a little bit jealous.
Oh, no. Everyone gets the best pictures.
That's exactly. Well, I can't wait to come
Actually,
next
you know
time.
what? Some of it, we have one plot is still standing. All right, we're letting it go to seed.
Okay.
So you still have a little opportunity to come down, and I'll personally show you the hemp field, show you the tall
count me in
America.
Well, then count me in, and I'll get a hold of you as soon as we're off.
All right, very good.
Well, thank you so much for joining. If anybody else has questions or needs anything, don't hesitate to holler. This will be recorded and shared on our YouTube channel, Global Hemp Association. Besides that, we're signing off.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Mandi.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir.
All right. Take care.